I still remember the exact tone of his voice. Not angry. Not rude. Just casual. Like he was telling me the weather. "We really appreciate everything you do here," my manager said, leaning back in his chair. "But promotion-wise? Not this year." I nodded. Smiled, even. Said, "I understand." Inside, something finally clicked into place. This wasn't about timing. Or budgets. Or experience. This was about the fact that I had made myself too useful exactly where I was. And that was the moment I stopped trying to move up. And quietly started planning my exit. When I first joined the company, I wasn't special. No fancy title. No corner office. No promises of rapid growth. Just a desk near the printer, a login email, and a manager who said, "If you work hard here, you'll be noticed." I believed that. Back then, the place was messy. Not chaotic, just quietly inefficient. Processes lived in people's heads. Files were scattered across shared drives with names like final_v3. If something broke, everyone said the same thing. "Ask around. Someone probably knows." I didn't come in trying to be a hero. I just hated confusion. So when I noticed a report that took 2 people 3 days to prepare, I stayed late one evening and rebuilt it. When I saw coworkers manually copying data between systems, I wrote a small script to automate it. When new hires looked lost, I sat with them, not because I was asked, but because I remembered how frustrating it felt. At first, it was invisible work. No applause. No recognition. But things started changing. People stopped saying, "Ask around." They started saying, "Ask me." If something didn't work, my inbox pinged. If something was unclear, my desk filled up. If a deadline was at risk, my name was mentioned in meetings I wasn't even invited to. I told myself this was good. This is what being valuable looks like, right? Soon, managers from other teams were looping me into emails. Not officially, just quietly. "Hey, can you sanity check this? You built something similar once, right? Do you know why this keeps failing?" I always said yes. Because every yes felt like an investment. Every late night felt like proof. Every solved problem felt like a step upward. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't climbing the ladder. I was becoming the ladder. Then came the systems. I started connecting things no one else had time to understand. I created workflows that smoothed over cracks leadership didn't even know existed. I made tools that quietly prevented disasters before they happened. When something went right, no one noticed. When something went wrong, they noticed immediately, because I wasn't there yet. That's when I understood something dangerous. The company didn't run because of me. But it worked better when I was involved. And once that happens, you stop being an employee. You become infrastructure. By the time my first performance review rolled around, I wasn't nervous. I was confident. Not in an arrogant way, just quietly certain. I had numbers, results, and something even better, proof that things broke when I wasn't around. I had stayed late, covered gaps, fixed problems no one else even understood yet. So when I applied for the promotion, it didn't feel like a gamble. It felt like a formality. I prepared like it mattered. I printed metrics. Highlighted improvements. Listed projects that used to take days and now took hours. I even had emails, thank you notes from managers who said they couldn't have done this without me. I walked into that meeting calm, professional, ready. My manager smiled the whole time. He nodded while I talked. He agreed when I explained my impact. He even said, "You've really stepped up this year." Then came the pause. That small, uncomfortable silence people use when they already know the answer they're about to give you. We decided to go in a different direction. Different direction. They promoted someone else. Someone nice. Someone hardworking. Someone I had trained. I congratulated them. I meant it, at least at first. It wasn't their fault. They didn't steal anything. They were just standing in the right place when the decision was made. But within a week, reality set in. They started asking me questions. Not casually. Not occasionally. Constantly. How did you set this up? Can you review this before I send it? I don't want to break anything, can you handle it? I was doing the same work. More of it, actually, just without the title. Without the pay. Without the authority. Meetings got stranger after that. They talked about my systems like they belonged to the team. They referenced my work without mentioning my name. And when problems came up, eyes still turned toward me. I told myself this was temporary. That leadership was watching. That they'd see the imbalance. That next cycle would be different. So I worked harder. I didn't complain. I didn't push back. I smiled, stayed late, and kept everything running. But something had changed. For the first time, I noticed the pattern. They weren't overlooking me. They were using me, and I hadn't yet learned the most important lesson of all. When a company shows you who they are, believe them the first time. After the first rejection, I should have pulled back. That's what I tell myself now. But at the time, I did the opposite. I thought maybe I hadn't made it obvious enough. Maybe leadership just needed more time to see how much I was really carrying. So instead of slowing down, I leaned in. Hard. I stopped just fixing problems. I started preventing them. I looked at every weak point in the department and asked myself one question. What happens if this breaks at the worst possible time? Then I made sure it wouldn't. I built systems that caught errors before anyone noticed. I connected tools that were never meant to talk to each other. I simplified workflows so much that people forgot how messy things used to be. The smoother everything ran, the quieter my work became. No fires meant no praise. No emergencies meant no spotlight. Success became invisible. People started assuming things just worked. Like magic. Or like it had always been that way. When new hires joined, I trained them. Not officially, it just happened. Managers would point at me and say, "Sit with them. You're good at explaining things." So I did. I explained not just what to do, but why. I shared shortcuts. I shared context. I shared pieces of my thinking that had taken years to develop. At some point, I realized something uncomfortable. Everyone around me was leveling up. Except me. My calendar filled with meetings I wasn't invited to but was expected to support. Decisions were made using tools I built, without asking my input. People talked around me instead of to me. And yet, when something broke, they came running. That's when it hit me. I wasn't being developed. I was being depended on. There's a big difference. Development leads upward. Dependence keeps you exactly where you are. And the more reliable I became, the more trapped I was. I told myself it would pay off. I told myself loyalty mattered. But deep down, I could feel it. I had made myself too useful to move. The second promotion cycle came around quietly. No big announcement. No encouragement. I almost didn't apply. Almost. But there was still that small, stubborn part of me that wanted to believe this was all just bad timing. That effort still mattered. That someone, somewhere, was keeping score. So I applied again. This time, I didn't overprepare. I didn't bring receipts. I didn't make speeches. I assumed my work spoke for itself. The meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. My manager didn't look uncomfortable this time. He looked relaxed. Like the decision had already been agreed upon by people I would never meet. He didn't talk about growth. Didn't talk about potential. He leaned forward slightly and said the sentence that changed everything. "You're indispensable right now." I waited. There was a pause where I expected the but. The part where he explained how that would be rewarded. Instead, he continued. "We really can't afford to move you. The department relies on you too much." There it was. Said plainly. Without apology. I nodded. Thanked him. Even cracked a small smile, like I understood. But inside, something went very still. They weren't saying I wasn't good enough. They were saying I was too good where I was. Too useful to promote. Too valuable to replace. Too convenient to reward. On the way back to my desk, I noticed something strange. Nothing had changed. People were still laughing. Emails were still coming in. My calendar was still full. The world didn't stop just because I had finally understood my place in it. That afternoon, a senior manager messaged me. "Quick question, can you take a look at something? Urgent." I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. Indispensable. That word kept echoing. That night, for the first time, I didn't stay late. I went home on time. And I started paying attention. Once that word was said out loud, indispensable, I couldn't unhear it. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Meetings I wasn't invited to suddenly mattered more. Decisions were being made using tools I'd built, workflows I'd designed, data I'd cleaned, but my name never came up. Slides changed hands. Screens were shared. My work was everywhere. Just, detached from me. One day, I sat in on a meeting because someone needed me on standby. The manager presenting was using a dashboard I'd built late one weekend. He explained it confidently, like it was second nature. Someone asked a technical question. He froze. All eyes turned to me. I answered calmly. He nodded. Then he continued the presentation as if nothing had happened. Later that same week, promotions were announced. 2 people moved up. Both of them used systems I maintained daily. Both of them had come to my desk countless times asking for help. One of them still had notes I'd written taped to their monitor. I congratulated them. I meant it. But when I went back to my desk, I felt something twist in my chest, not anger, not jealousy. Recognition. I wasn't being overlooked by accident. I was the foundation. And foundations don't get promoted. They just get built over. The work didn't slow down after that. If anything, it increased. Now, when something critical came up, people didn't ask if I could help. They assumed I would. Deadlines were set with my involvement as a given. Problems were accepted as handled before I even saw them. One afternoon, my new supervisor, someone I had trained, laughed and said, "Honestly, if you ever left, we'd be in real trouble." Everyone laughed. I did too. But this time, the thought didn't scare me. It lingered. And for the first time, I wondered what would actually happen if I stopped holding everything together. By the time the next promotion cycle came around, I already knew the answer. I don't know why I applied again. Maybe habit. Maybe closure. Maybe I just wanted to see if anything had changed. It hadn't. The meeting felt shorter than the last one. No small talk. No false build-up. Just polite words arranged carefully so no one had to take responsibility for them. "Leadership really values you," my manager said. "Your impact is undeniable." I waited. "But right now, moving you wouldn't be in the company's best interest." There it was again. Different words. Same meaning. I asked a simple question, the only one that mattered. What would I need to change to be considered next time? He hesitated. Not because he was thinking. Because there was no answer. Finally, he said. Honestly? Just keep doing what you're doing. That's when it ended. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just, internally. I realized there was no path forward here. No version of events where more effort led to growth. I had already given them everything they could extract from me. I thanked him for his time. Stood up. Shook his hand. Back at my desk, my inbox was already filling up. Questions. Requests. Problems that needed just a quick fix. I handled them. Calmly. Professionally. But that night, I didn't think about how to improve the systems anymore. I thought about how to leave them. And for the first time in years, that thought felt like relief. I didn't storm out. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't announce my intentions. I went home that night and updated my resume. Not dramatically. Not like a protest. Just factually. Dates. Titles. Achievements. Projects. Metrics. Tools I had built. Systems I had designed. Trainings I had led. Everything they had relied on without rewarding me. For the next few weeks, I searched quietly. I didn't apply to everything, just the roles that mattered. Roles where my skills, my experience, my unique knowledge would be recognized and valued. I networked, sent polite messages, and quietly scheduled interviews. No social media announcements. No, I'm done posts. Nothing to alert the people who had underestimated me for years. And slowly, opportunities began to appear. One of them stood out immediately, a position with a clear growth path, a proper title, and a salary that reflected not just my effort, but my actual worth. 40% more than I had been earning. Responsibilities that challenged me. A team that wanted me, not just my skills, but my perspective. I took a few deep breaths, thought about the company I'd spent 5 years building from the inside out, and realized I was finally free. When the offer came officially, I didn't negotiate much. I didn't stall. I accepted within 10 minutes. I didn't tell anyone yet. Not my current manager, not my coworkers. I just smiled. For the first time in years, I smiled without worry. Because now, I held the power. Not as an employee. Not as someone indispensable. But as someone in control of their own future. The morning I handed in my resignation, everything felt strangely quiet. I walked into my manager's office like it was any other day. Calm. Collected. Professional. I placed the letter on his desk. I'm resigning. My last day will be 2 weeks from today. He looked up at me, blinked, and for a second, I thought he didn't hear me. Wait, you're serious? Very. There was no theatrics. No pleading. Just the truth, I had already made up my mind. Suddenly, the polite, casual demeanor slipped. Can we counteroffer? Anything we can do to keep you? I shook my head. No. I've accepted an offer elsewhere. Thank you for everything, but my decision is final. Then came the questions. Could you stay a few months to help us transition? Maybe we promote you now instead? We really don't want to lose you. I listened politely. I thanked them for the consideration. And I gave one compromise, 2 weeks. Enough time to tie up loose ends, nothing more. After leaving the office, the rest of the day was surreal. Emails kept landing in my inbox. Requests piled up. But now I wasn't worried. I had stopped giving more than what was owed. For the first time, I noticed the subtle looks from coworkers. A mixture of disbelief and unease. I had been the invisible engine keeping everything running, and now, they knew just how dependent the company had been on me. The first ripple of panic had begun. And I hadn't done anything yet. The first week after my departure was quiet on my end. I answered a few questions professionally. A few clarifications here and there. But mostly, I let them try to navigate the systems I had built on their own. That's when the cracks started to show. Small things at first. Reports breaking because someone forgot a hidden step. Emails not routing properly. Deadlines missed because no one knew the shortcuts I had coded into the workflow. I didn't gloat. I didn't intervene unnecessarily. I simply replied politely to urgent questions, and then I stepped back. They called consultants. Expensive ones. But the consultants didn't understand the reasoning behind my systems. They could follow instructions, but they couldn't anticipate why I had built things a certain way, or what could go wrong if one small detail was overlooked. The company slowly began to realize something I had known for years. They hadn't just relied on me. They had built their operations around me, and no one else fully understood the foundation. It was subtle at first, like ripples across water. Then the panic started. Managers were scrambling. People were frantically searching emails, old notes, and even chat histories, trying to patch holes. I watched quietly from my new role. No satisfaction needed. No revenge required. Just clarity. They had finally learned what it meant to rely on someone they refused to value. The morning of my last day, the office felt strange. Same desks. Same fluorescent lights. Same buzzing computers. But the energy was different. People who had barely spoken to me in meetings were now asking last-minute questions. Managers who had never thanked me properly were suddenly making small talk. The quiet confidence I'd carried for years had become a spotlight I didn't ask for, but couldn't escape. They threw a farewell lunch. Cake. Coffee. Awkward speeches. Some tried to make jokes about how they'd figure it out without me. No one laughed except me. My manager pulled me aside. Honestly, you deserved that promotion years ago. I smiled. I nodded. I said nothing. Words weren't necessary. As I packed my things, I noticed subtle panic in people's faces. Files left unorganized. Notes half-written. Deadlines that no one fully understood. I walked out of the office, holding my boxes, calm as ever. No resentment. No yelling. No dramatic exit. Just clarity. For years, I had been indispensable, and they had ignored me. Now, they were left to deal with the consequences. And for the first time, I felt completely free. I didn't need to check in. I didn't need to intervene. I had done my part, professionally, cleanly, and on my own timeline. And that's when the ripple effect began. It started small. A report failed to generate on time. A workflow stalled because a key step was missed. A client email went unanswered because the person responsible didn't know how to navigate the system I had built. The calls started coming in, not to me, but to my old manager, panicked and frustrated. Consultants were hired to try to fix things. Expensive ones. Highly recommended ones. They could follow instructions. They could read documentation. But they couldn't anticipate the way everything had been connected. They couldn't see the gaps that only someone who had built the systems from scratch could notice. Meanwhile, my old coworkers were scrambling. Deadlines slipped. Mistakes became visible. Productivity dropped. Leadership meetings became tense. Everyone was suddenly aware of what it meant to rely on one person and never actually support or replace them. And I watched quietly. No gloating. No interference. Just the satisfaction of knowing that the systems I had created weren't fragile, they were critical. And a company that refused to value me had suddenly realized just how much they depended on me. By the third month after I left, the problems weren't small anymore. Deadlines were missed across multiple teams. Projects stalled because dependencies no one understood were suddenly broken. Clients were unhappy, frustrated by delays and errors that had never happened when I was around. Management scrambled. Meetings ran longer, decisions slowed down, and panic started creeping into emails. People who once relied on my guidance were now pointing fingers. They called each other, trying to solve problems they didn't fully understand. Consultants tried to patch things together, but they couldn't replicate the reasoning behind the systems. They could follow the rules, but they couldn't anticipate the exceptions, the quirks, the hidden fixes I had built over 5 years. 2 people quit under the pressure. 1 department was restructured entirely. Internal morale dropped. Mistakes multiplied. I didn't interfere. I didn't reach out. I simply heard the updates from old colleagues and quietly tracked the ripple I had always known would happen. Leadership finally realized something painfully obvious. They hadn't just relied on me, they had built the company's operations around me. And for the first time, the cost of undervaluing an employee became real, immediate, and expensive. The company hadn't failed because I left. It had failed because it had ignored the person keeping it alive. Say, next, and I'll write Chapter 13, The Call, where leadership reaches out to me, and I finally leverage my value fully. This is the satisfying turning point of quiet revenge. 6 months after I left, my phone rang. I recognized the number immediately. It was my old manager. I answered casually. "Hey, it's been a while. Can I ask a favor? We need someone to consult for a short period. Could you help?" I paused. Just long enough to make the silence feel deliberate. "Depends," I said. "What kind of rate are we talking about?" They hesitated. The unspoken panic was almost audible. Then came the answer. "We'll pay anything reasonable, whatever it takes." I smiled. I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. I named my rate. Triple what I had earned as a full-time employee. I made it clear, minimum 3 months. Full availability during that time. No shortcuts. They accepted immediately. For the first time, I was back in the office not as an employee, not as someone indispensable, but as an outsider in control. I didn't rush. I didn't show desperation. I walked in with professionalism and quietly reminded them why I had been indispensable in the first place. Every question I answered came with a price tag. Every problem I solved reminded them of a truth they had ignored. You can't undervalue someone and expect things to keep running the same way. And for the first time, I got to decide exactly how my value would be recognized. Walking back into the office 6 months later felt surreal. Same desks. Same people. Same fluorescent lights humming above. But the atmosphere was different. Tension hung in the air. Deadlines had slipped. Processes were breaking. The subtle panic from leadership was palpable, even though they tried to mask it. I didn't hurry. I didn't argue. I didn't lecture. I simply did my job, on my terms. I reviewed every system I had built. I fixed critical issues. I documented everything, every hidden process, every step, every logic decision I had made over the years. And I made it very clear, there would never be another me if they ignored this documentation again. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I was no longer just indispensable. I was valued, and I had defined the terms. No one begged. No one pleaded. They simply recognized the truth: the company's success had been built on someone they failed to reward. For me, it wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about clarity. Control. Justice. I fixed what needed fixing. I left them with a blueprint. And I walked out of the office for good, knowing they had finally learned the cost of undervaluing talent. When my consulting contract ended, I left for good. No dramatic exit. No yelling. No burning bridges. Just clarity. The company didn't collapse because I left. It collapsed because it had built its success on someone it refused to value. Here's the truth I learned. Hard work alone doesn't always get rewarded. Sometimes it gets exploited. Loyalty without leverage is a trap. Being indispensable can keep you stuck exactly where you are. I didn't take revenge in the way most people expect. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't steal, lie, or manipulate. I simply stopped giving away my future to people who had already decided my ceiling. And when they finally realized my worth, they had to pay for it. That's all the revenge I needed. Quiet. Calculated. Complete.